Right, the trade war. Let's have some exposure on that. And again, it's now escalating, and it's hurting both economies. And an example of working to a reaction to the now thinking and not future thinking. I keep mentioning this word because it's important to use if we're going to go forward. And yes, those trade deals needed correcting, as the Western businesses, and in particular American businesses, were being harvested in a transfer to the East as a coordinated plan to transfer everything from West to East, as agreed by the former controllers back in 1910 via the Federal Reserve. That's the gist of it. Now, the deals per se are not country to country, forget that. Whilst the names America and China will crop up as the labels, the true reason is more to do with the Rothschilds and the dragon groups that operate in both countries. The Trans-Pacific and the Transatlantic deals were nothing to do with countries. It never was. But again, the Rothschilds, dragon groups and the fake Chinese elders axis. The deals, those particular deals, Trans-Pacific and Transatlantic, also involved off-world, I might add. And everyone was taking a cut out of it. That's why everything's so bloody expensive now. There's too many of those groups, aforementioned groups, are all taking cuts out of it. Langley, Pentagon, you name it. They're all IRS, Federal Reserve, all taking chunks out of everything, including every credit card transaction. Not no more than that, but that's what was going on. Now, the Dow went down 623 points there about last Friday due to China increasing the tariffs, and Trump was threatening to impose more back on China. Now, whilst I agree in principle with that tit for tat, where I have issues is there was no future thinking or planning in place for eventualities. And this, as recent shows, including this one, has stated, is the big problem. Now, one of the several plans and solutions this show has put forward was for America to close itself off from the rest of the world, clean house, and implement new policies. Why? Because our current policies on all levels don't work. None of them. It's not beneficial to the country, the president, or the people, and is leading to utter chaos on levels not previously seen. People will hark back to the 1929 Depression, and it was bad from all accounts. But there are three things radically different between now and then that one must take into account. One, back then there was only 106 million people in America. Now it's 330 million. Treble. Two, most people then were self-sufficient in some way and more used to, shall we say, a more impoverished lifestyle. Now America has had a prolonged period with more people living in a middle class background, albeit largely based on debt. And the American way of life is vastly different now from then. And three, Americans by and large have a sense of entitlement. They expect to be served quickly in restaurants and shops and bars or banks, and they're used to having things here now. Kim would agree me 100% on that. She kind of ribs me for my patience. And this is what I'm warning of, not to put you in fear, but to prepare just in case. So when people complain of the potential of giving 1/3 to the order or 1/3 to the government without spending 1 second to think of the consequences of what happens if we don't, or what happens if no one gets anything, yet again, we have what we have now, a recipe for chaos and also disaster. If you were asked personally to vote on no funds to the order or to us and chaos, or funds to both and less chaos, what would you choose? Regardless of which answer you gave, that's not where I'm going with this. What you've just done is future thinking, not reactionary thinking. Oh, what are you giving 1/3 to the cabal for? What Trump and team should have done with this trade war is we should have had contingency plans to protect the American people and the jobs before launching into an international trade war. That is future thinking. Instead, we have what we have always done, be it the people or the government, is a reactionary policy. It's an Ouroboros plan of the previous controllers, whereby they launch one plan, let's just say we're going to damage the family to reduce the population and various other plans connected to it, and then realise they've misused, let's put it bluntly, they've stolen many of the public funds, and now that first policy of cut back on the family now impacts on the pension funds and the social security that they have looted. It's chewing at both ends. Another plan that they had, social engineering, is to have many people on benefits because they're easier to control, without realising only one group of people really pays taxes: the working and middle class. So now each country doesn't have enough funds, which then feeds the Federal Reserve harvesting machine, as countries with not enough funds then have to borrow off them at 10% per dollar. But Marduk cared not for that, as he just left the minions spinning the wheels, and like the Ouroboros, round and round we go. So with future thinking, Trump should have took the trust funds and started the projects, and asked the people to target certain industries for investment or start-up businesses that this country would be short of in the event of no import trading. And this is what I'm trying to encourage the members to do, and then teach the wider circles. Future thinking has to be the way forward for progression. You know, we have ran all levels of society with Ouroboros and harvesting plans for the benefit of the few and ultimately the poverty of us all. So when presented with a solution or an idea, far deeper thinking is required on all of our parts to make progress, be that in life, business, or government. And that's the task we have to change going forward. Future thinking, not reactionary. Reaction to the headline. We have to stop doing that. That's the programme. Step out of the programme. You think on it. Well, if this happens, I would like to do this. What are the implications of me? The pros and cons of me doing this particular action? That's future thinking. I want for argument's sake, an animal shelter. Fine. What are you basing that on? What are the pros and cons? Are there any in the region where you live in? How are you going to set it up? Is the land available? Where are the animals coming from? Have you got officers? Do you need staff? How many? These are all the things that you are tasked to think of when you come up with any sort of action, be it the projects or general life. For too long now, we've just ran on reactionary. Talking about trading, America has got one major problem. I would suggest it's more than that. This is based on the trading platform of America, the country, and the issues they're facing future trading and or business. And the reason being is America relies heavily on military spending, which we've covered several times. And major exports is military and control system based commodities and also technology. Well, the top 10 trades or exports from America is machinery, including computers, 213 billion, which is actually 12.8% of our total exports. Mineral fuels, 190 billion. Electric machinery and equipment, 176 billion. Aircraft and spacecraft, 139 billion. Vehicles, 131 billion. Optical, technical and medical apparatus, like I said, they're all the control systems businesses, 90 billion. Plastics and plastic articles, 66.5 billion. Gems and precious metals accounts for 64 billion, and pharmaceuticals, 48.5 billion. Organic chemicals are the 10th at 40 billion. So none of the more basic exports like food or clothing is in the top 10. And most of those industries that I've just mentioned are all the conglomerate or corporate or military-based industries. And what the American public don't know is most of those deals don't get arranged by the government. Oops. Or of any benefit to the government either. The people or the country. None. And for America and for us all to flourish, a policy change is required with our exports and imports for that matter. Following on that theme, Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, gave a veiled threat to Trump this week that he must be flexible in trade deals to curry favour with the UK. So I looked up the figures. The UK import and export is running at a deficit of $220 billion a year after year. And the America is the highest importer of UK goods and is also responsible for around 12 to 15% of the UK exports. Now the UK imports American goods totaling 86 billion and Americans purchase UK goods at 45 billion. But the difference is America is the UK's highest importer. The UK is only America's 5th highest importer and is only responsible for 4% of our exports. So one would think on a country basis that the UK has to be more flexible to protect their business dealings than America does based on those figures. Afghanistan is now coming to a head, finally. And I pulled this piece which highlights what's gone on there in some degrees, and it also gave a warning of who is carrying on and playing games over there. But we're led to believe that the US and the Taliban, which you have to remember was US funded while they were fighting Russia in Afghanistan, are apparently close to agreeing a deal that would see the withdrawal of all US and NATO forces from Afghanistan. And the article said the question is, though, will it? And they gave some context, beginning with the fact that the tortured history of the landlocked country, whose geographic location as a land bridge between Central Asia and the Middle East, and in modern times also as a potentially vital energy bridge, entitles the Afghan people to believe that they are uniquely cursed. A bit like Turkey. They're the same. And the inordinate price that the country of Afghanistan has been forced to pay since the, quote, US-backed Mujahideen overran the country in the early 90s. That's the Taliban. You know, the US-backed Mujahideen, the same group who are now branded as terrorists. You know, it's the same as the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, that to me. They give loads of funds to these people to start something, and then they turn around and brand them terrorists and then fight, which creates money for them, not for the country. All the way up to the now 18 years of US NATO attacks, occupation and a propping up of a series of corrupt governments in Kabul should be inscribed on the gravestone of what has passed for the foreign policy in the West since the Soviet Union departed the scene. See, previously they just blamed everything on Russia. USSR is now gone. Didn't change, did it? And it went on, there is, however, an unofficial element to the US presence in the country. It is a presence both sinister and conspicuous by its absence from the draft agreement drawn up in Doha. Who are that? Sinister and conspicuous by its absence and unofficial presence? The CIA. Calling to mind the infamous CIA-run Contras in Central America in the 1980s, the notorious US intelligence agency has been running in Afghanistan what amounts to, quote, a private war with its own private army, unquote. And details of the CIA's operations in the country are highlighted in a chilling report which was produced by the Costs of War project based in Brown's University Watson Institute of International and Public Affairs. That's a mouthful. And specifically, the report traces the origin of these militia groups to the initial 2001 invasion, when US military forces and the CIA organised them to fight Islamic militants. The same Islamic militants that the CIA funded. Funding both sides, fighting both sides. Just keeps the war running, you see. However, it stated the CIA, 18 years on, is still running local militias in the country, which have reportedly committed serious human rights abuses, including numerous extrajudicial killings of civilians. Again, different theatre, same antics. And finally, the report's authors make the point that there is virtually no public oversight of their activities, there being the CIA, or accountability for grave human rights abuses. Have we not said this several times in the show? There's a lack of accountability in what people think are government organisations in this country, and they're not. All the 3 and 4 letter are nothing to do with the government. That's an illusion. They're all private entities with, as the report says, zero oversight of what they're doing or accountability for human rights abuses. None. And it said this is a major issue America must face up to and deal with. These private armies and security groups are now running everything sinister globally. And again, we've covered this in the show. But the kicker is, the American people are paying for them to destroy us and other countries. That's what gets me. What most people don't know, but our regular members do, is most government services are now in the hands of these same groups. Private security. And they need to be dismantled, and we start again with better and more balanced people. The total cost, which the article focused on, they always focus on the cost in terms of money first, which is sick in and of itself, has been $780 billion spent on Afghanistan. The real cost is over 2,000 American lives and 20,000 injured. And we gained what from it? Nothing. If you asked Americans now, why are we in Afghanistan? You're going to get about 50 different answers. Why? Because nobody knows. Our members know. Why? They're running the drug war. Same company, same 3 letters, same group. That's why. Drug money for black budgets. Over 2,000 American lives were lost because of, and 20,000 injured. Do you think those 20,000 injured have been looked after or paid now they're unable to work? No. Look at all the veterans lying on street corners. Just cast you aside. And this needs to be addressed.